and really begin to have diverse voices. So, and I will say, having women on boards and having women run companies and lead companies and be able to have a seat at the table is hugely important, because the
Mhm.
way we look at the world is always about longevity. We always think of it as, how will it impact society? How will it impact our community? How will it impact our families? How will this impact our children?
Dr. Loretta Chen, welcome to Pioneering in the Metaverse. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. Before we jump into the topic du jour, I wanted to quickly chat about your incredible bio, because you have so many interesting things that you've been up to, are doing, have done. You've been an international consultant for the Kingdom of Bhutan since 2011. Really cool. You're the founder of Smobler, a turnkey metaverse architect that takes brands, IPs, and communities to the forefront of Web3. I'm gonna want to talk about that piece there. But the project is backed by the Sandbox, Brinc, supported by Enterprise Singapore and Info Media Development Authority of Singapore, IMDA. In your latest venture, you're aiming to create a metaverse for good to drive positive change, promote inclusivity, and leverage emerging technologies to empower and inspire audiences across the globe. Welcome to Pioneering in the Metaverse.
Thank you so much, Samir. It's always an honor and pleasure to be on air with other, like-minded folks like you. So thank you so much for having me.
No, of course. I think the very first thing I want to ask you is, how does someone like yourself, who's so invested and working in this space, how do you define the metaverse?
A great question. Everyone starts off slightly differently in every podcast, but I suppose it's a great place to start. I think suffice to say, it has morphed since Facebook changed its name to Meta. But I think in its earliest incarnation, as Matthew Ball has tried to describe in his book, The Metaverse, that it is a three-dimensional immersive world. And it is going to enable us to be more connected, to be more of ourselves, and more importantly, allow us to work, play, socialize into this space. And to take it a little bit more concisely into what Smobler does is that we were, and just to also thank you for that incredible readout of my bio. I always sort of little cringe when I hear that, but thank you very much.
And for full disclosure, there was so much more.
Yes, yes. I was going to say, where do we start? Because you did start by asking, who I was, and I was always like, where do we start? So, but just take it squarely into Smobler. Smobler was founded over the pandemic because I saw an opportunity to take brands, IPs, and communities onto the blockchain space. Just like the discovery of electricity, I knew that the discovery or the advent of blockchain technology was fundamentally going to change our lives, because for the first time, it enables regular folks like us, not just big tech, to be able to, own our own data. And once you have ownership, you can then possibly develop, monetize on that ownership, right? Just as why, the great American dream is to aspire to own a home, or, right? Because once you have ownership, then you have the ability to create more opportunities. So let's start from there. So back to your question, what is the metaverse? The metaverse is like I said, 3D more immersive world that enables us to work, live, play, and socialize onto this digital space that we are already living in. It's not some brand new concoction. It's just this sort of inevitable drive towards more and more immersion. So I talk about the metaverse is really about more interoperability, a little bit more immersion, and definitely more ability for us to own more of our data and identity.
So when you talk about the metaverse being a force for good, using it to drive positive change, inclusivity, how does that happen in a 3D digital environment?
I think a variety of ways. I think for every founder, I think we really need to start with our origin story, right? Just as like a parent, right? You sort of birth or place your values and your ideals of the world onto your child, right? So again, harkening back to the bio they read of me, I mean, my background was I am a professor, I'm a media personality, always an advocate for women and youth and for LGBTQIA, basically folks that typically are marginalized and don't have a voice. I mean, if you look at me, Asian, female, the fact that I can have a seat at the table meant that I definitely have had hurdles my way, right? I've had,
Sure.
men, talk down to me like this, literally when I was younger. Now I'm pushing 50, so I can be a lot more comfortable in my own skin. I always have been, but I know that there are many women or men who look like me or not, may not have the opportunity. So let's start from there. Being born and raised in Singapore, recognizing that I've had the immense opportunity to be educated in, the United Kingdom, in the University of London, and then UCLA, having had the best education, and then being able to be an entrepreneur at a young age was already immense privilege. Recognizing that to be able to graduate without student debt and to be able to realize my wild fantasies as an entrepreneur at a young age is already a privilege that today I look back at a lot of my students who don't have that because they graduate with a lot of student debt and they can't
Hmm.
fulfill those dreams. So let's start from there. And then of course we talk about inequities, inequalities. I mean, nobody, you can choose the person you marry, hopefully, but you can't choose the family you're born into. So some of these inherent social inequities are already inherently described. So fast forward to and so all the work that I've done, whether it is my background was always like I told you in academia where I taught, and in broadcast, so television, radio, publishing. I write books on leadership and always on inequities and how we can make this world a little bit better. So in all of these things that I've done, that's always been me. So I take that into the Web3 space because in 2020, I saw that there were huge swaths of people that were getting a lot richer from COVID, but there was also a lot of folks who would lose their jobs, right? Just where I was based in Hawaii, it was clear that hospitality was thrashed, that a lot of mom and pop shops were probably not going to come back post-COVID. So I saw an opportunity to drive businesses, IPs, and communities onto the digital space. So to give you very concrete examples, my now co-founder, he used to work for me in my creative agency 15 years ago. He lost his job over COVID, right? He's a designer. People tend to think that art and design goes out the water, goes out the door when there's a crisis, right? You think about essential workers. So a lot of designers, artists, theater practitioners, they were out of a job. So he was one of those. And I also saw that their work was either not coming back or will be changed fundamentally when they came back. So he has an autistic son. He was down to $70. And so my immediate thought was, how might I be able to help him? I was all the way in Hawaii and he was in Calgary, Canada. But I realized he wasn't the only one. So fast forward to us setting up Smobler, and the intention was very genuine and pure, was how might I be able to create jobs in this new space? So the intention was to enable folks who typically were not able to own property or own their own assets in real world to now be able to have ownership in this three-dimensional metaverse space. So this also coincided with the rise of like GameFi, the rise of projects like the Sandbox, who is now an investor at Axie Infinity, where people woke up to recognizing that I could actually make money from gaming. And it's not just
Hmm.
fun and games, but I could actually make money off that. Sure, I mean, inherently, we can argue whether or not good, bad, what's the long term. But just to answer your question squarely, it offered an opportunity for people to sit up and realize I could make money from gaming. And this was a huge sort of wake up call, especially for folks in like the Philippines, right? Because Axie Infinity really took off in like developing countries like the Philippines because there was no jobs. And then folks were able to literally make money off their mobile phones doing stuff that they loved. Now, this was just a dream come true for any young person or person in a developing country, right? Because oftentimes you have to take on jobs that you don't like, but now there was a possibility. So I think it was fusing all of this. It was the ability to recognize that we are now in a new frontier where technology, a black swan event, and all of these forces of space and time were pushing us towards a new sort of narrative where you really could see the conflation of art and tech and design and blockchain all come together. Typically, art would be seen to be very bourgeois, right? Or gaming was seen as just fun, or design was seen to be only held in the realms of like if you were like an Apple designer, like you must have some sort of design power. But today, all of these things are democratized, and folks are able to make a career of it, to monetize of it. So I saw this as something that I really wanted to do. So it's a very long preamble, and you can edit that, Jan. So fast forward to I wanted to, if I was going to partake in this space, I knew I wanted to create a Metaverse for Good initiative, meaning I wanted to be able to intervene in discourses or verticals like education. One of the first projects we did was to partner with a private college called Aventis, and we raised a $1 million scholarship fund to disseminate to developing countries if, of course, they sign up with the college. And the aim was to democratize education and to use blockchain technology and to be able to tokenize education for this community. That's one of the projects that we did. One of the
Mm.
other ones that really caught the media attention was when we worked with the Food Bank. So the Food Bank is one of the biggest organizations around the world, and I worked with a very pioneering CEO, Nicole Ng, and we understood that how philanthropy used to be done was that we used to always just chase after old money, right? A very select category of donors. But with the advent of blockchain and crypto and the rise of these sort of young crypto rich and digitally savvy folks, we decided that it would be possible for us to start a campaign to target digital native folks who wanted to do good but have typically never been asked, right? And so we partnered with the food bank to create a program where we created all the non-fungible tokens and digital collectibles. So we turned her real world assets, we tokenized them, and we digitized them. So for example, the food bank literally has a car rally program, literally, right? So what we did was we turned that idea of that car rally into a non-fungible token. Folks could purchase that. And in return, what we did was we would make that person, let's say Smer would then be the sponsor or the donor of the real world event. So it works both ways. In the early days, it enabled folks to understand what utility is in an NFT. Because back then, NFTs were just seen to be just art pieces, right? But what we did was to be able to say, okay, if Smer had bought the food bank digital collectible, he will then see his name emblazoned on the car rally. So that could be seen as advertising and marketing and branding also for Smer and your organization. So in the early days, it was a lot of education. It was a lot of getting people to understand, hello, Kat, what utility is. So that was one of the other Metaverse for Good projects that we did. And then we went on to do some more. I mean, I can go on and on. We started a herstory program where our trainers went to schools to teach young girls how to voxel. And one of the things I always said is you don't have to wait for your boyfriend to buy you that MS bag, right? When you can voxelize it and then, monetize on it as well. But the key was to find interesting use cases for the demographic that I really wanted to reach out to get them to understand that this digital space is, yes, it is fun, and yes, it is fun and games, but it can also be a space for you to monetize and gain economic security if you educate yourself early and have financial literacy and begin to be smart and piece all these things together. And that really was the intention. And I can go on with so many other projects that we've gone on to do.
I imagine. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all that. There's so many little threads in there that I want to pull on for more information, but I think one of the main pieces that stuck out to me was empowering people to be able to basically take charge of their own future. Um, in particular, it seems like to your earlier point when we were talking about your biography, the placement or where women are in the space, in the metaverse space, in the Web3 space as a whole, why is that so important? And I ask that question, I know the answer. It's an obvious one, but there still seems to be sometimes not an obvious approach for a lot of people. But I think if we don't encourage more women into the space, we lose out on an incredibly large sector of ideas, creativity, entrepreneurship, ingenuity. There's so many different facets of it. From your perspective and where you're sitting, what are you seeing? How far along are we in encouraging more women to enter into the Web3 space, and what could we be doing more of?
Thank you, Smer, for asking that. That's a huge question. Of course, then I'll probably have a long answer as well. The short version is yes, we definitely need more representation of any kind, right? We need more representation of you and me. We need diverse voices because this world is so big, so diverse. It is not just white, blonde, blue-eyed, which is, the kind of representations I grew up watching. Again, I love my white, blonde, and blue-eyed friends. Don't get me wrong. I love you all. I'm just saying, growing up, I mean, you can imagine as an Asian woman, reading books and everything was Snow White and Cinderella, and these were my Disney princesses, right? I mean, where was I, right? It was not until I was a grown woman that I had Hua Mulan, right? So I think it was also just, as a young person growing up, recognizing that I didn't have all of these role models. All of my role models were, based out of a North American stereotype or North American ideal of what beauty is. So I think that already shaped the person that I was and I have become. So that is one. And two, recognizing just that, women do hold up half the sky, right? I mean, 51% of the population is female. In fact, in China, there is a serious shortage of women because they have had a policy where they only, privilege boys. And now there are too many men and too few women. And of course, then, naturally, there's also issues from there, right? I mean, in my latest book that I don't want to segue into because I can talk about my latest book called Mother as well, when I really talk about, the real existential crisis beyond just climate change is an aging population and a population that's dying out in developed countries, especially. But that can be a whole other
I think
pod,
that's a whole other conversation. I'm
right?
curious from a Web3 perspective.
So specifically for Web3 too, I think it is also just recognizing that I mean, just historically, just looking into all the CEOs and all the head honchos of big tech companies, they tended to be men. Again, with full due respect, we love we love our male friends and our male allies. It's also the way you're socialized, the way you're raised, the way your perspectives are going to be shaped by how you are genderized and how you're perceived. And men, again, I have to make these sweeping statements, not for ignorance, but just to have a podcast. Otherwise, this would go on for too long. Is that men do have a different way in general of looking at things as women do. So I think it's always important to have diverse voices so that today's consumer isn't just going to look one way. We have everything today points to what greater diversity. Just look into what media has turned into with social media, with your TikToks and all your different Discord and Twitter channels. It's all about catering more and more to a niche market. And mind you, niche market today doesn't mean small. Niche market can mean huge demographics, huge populations, just very much based on their interests. And nothing to do with gender sometimes. And so the point is, it's really important to think beyond just gender and really begin to have diverse voices. So, and I will say, having women on boards and having women run companies and lead companies and be able to have a seat at the table is hugely important because the
Mhm.
way we look at the world is always about longevity. We always think of it as how will it impact society? How will it impact our community? How will it impact our families? How will this impact our children? Not just ROI. This is important. Having the 10x, 100x, 1000x, incredibly important as a founder. I know that. But one of the first things I look at too is how does that impact my teams and their families? Does this decision I make, will it impact my staff and then being able to provide for their families? Will it impact their children going to school? These are
Right.
things that I think about. Again, not to say that all the ROIs are not important, but if you don't take care of the small things, those things are affected too. So
Yep.
we just need more of that. And still today, only 2% of VC funds go to women. And that's why I work so hard because I want folks to recognize that women are worth investing in many more ways. We're going to work so hard because we have a chip on the shoulder and we want to prove that we have what it takes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you mentioned kids. Growing up, I was always told that playing video games was going to rot my brain, that it was bad for me. I needed to socialize more, go outside and play. Don't sit indoors and sit in front of a screen and game. That attitude seems to have shifted a little bit over the last, decade or so. But I am curious, with the introduction of a digital environment, an immersive digital environment that's really going to take you out of reality, Is there a concern from where you're sitting and what you're seeing of the next generation of kids basically having these headsets on their faces? Because I mean, that's where we're going to be for the next little while until we develop more and more or more compact hardware. But is there a concern from where you're sitting that this could actually be problematic for our next generation of users of the metaverse and the whole digital environment?
So Smer, again, I have to say my answers tend to be very long only because you have very loaded questions, which are observations packed in questions, right? So I first need to unpack your observation and then the question. So the observation is yes, I think I'll take your first part of the observation first, that yes, I think growing up, I have to say I'm very thankful that even though I obviously have Asian parents, my parents are so like different. They're like, just do whatever you love, girl. Like do whatever you love. We support you, whatever you love, just go do it. Just go be the, effing coolest gal that you can be because we love you. Right. So I will say that's already very different. But I do know that I was born in the 70s. I'm pushing 50 now. So all my peers had to be, engineers or doctors or lawyers because that was how, folks thought of the world, that you had to be an engineer or a doctor or lawyer in order to be actively and contributing a social impact and economic impact to a community and a household. So definitely that narrative is very true, especially for most Asian families. I could speak as an Asian child.
Mhm.
They tend to be very practical oriented, and also because back in the day, a lot of those families, tended to be from developing countries. So whether from Singapore or Korea or, all the ASEAN nations, we tended to have the same narrative that we were like nation building, right? So wealth and the accumulation of wealth through education and through engineering and things that built a society was seen as really important. Things like art and fashion and design and entertainment were seen as fluff. And that was actually what the entire Chen family thrived in. And having said that, I'm so thankful that I had parents that always just said, just do what you love, and what you love tends to be what you excel at. It tends to go together. What you excel at, you love to do it. It's a reinforcement loop, right? And so because we were able to do that, we're able to sit here today to say it's so important to be able to find a way to monetize what you love, because then you can create opportunities not just for yourself, but for your community. So to go back to your question about the gaming, yes, most families would then see gaming as, sort of really killing your brain cells and telling every child to not do that. But today, again, with the advent of what we see today, we are seeing a shift and a change in that. And today, in fact, if you look into how Roblox is, right, 78 million monthly average users, that's not a number to scoff at. So even if parents are not understanding what their kids are doing, I mean, your kids, parents, if you're watching, like they are playing video games. So it's either you don't know about it or you're not informed. It's not that they're not playing, like they are, right? Just take that
Mhm.
as
Yep.
but fast forward to the next point, which is your question. Yes, and that is a concern that I have. I think we would be remiss to say that let's create a world where kids are just going to go out outdoors and play soccer and chase foxes. A lot of kids today, especially in a post-COVID world, are going to be that much more digitally savvy. I mean, they're born with an iPad umbilically sort of attached to them. So
Mm.
I for creators and for visionaries and pioneers in the metaverse, we need to recognize that this is changing tides of the times with the advent of generative AI and all of this. We don't even need to learn how to code anymore. What we need to do is to be very proficient with digital technology. So to your point, there is a real danger that we do not know how to socialize anymore. We are also in danger of being only playing true violent games, because the fact is that violent games are very addictive, right? They make you want to get more gear and beat each other up. So I do see a correlation between the sort of violence we see in our media and what we do go outside the world. We're desensitized to violence. So these are some crucial things that I hope that Smobler can intervene in, even as a small company. We want to be able to create games that are sticky, games that are immersive, but games that also are educational. Hence, why we created Everest, that even though it's a climbing game and a sticky game, it gets people to want to race to the top of Everest. It also teaches people about the Sherpa people, about environmental change, about climate consciousness and trash that people leave behind when they're climbing a mountain, right? And so respecting the culture is is not about conquering the mountain, but submitting to the mountain, those spirits and attitudes. So what I challenge the team is whenever we're creating a game, to also be able to weave in these educational, socially impactful messaging. So the new IP we're creating, Ecorium, it is a first-person shooter game. I'm not going to deny it is going to be the world's first cross-chain, cross-IP game that would bring players from Roblox and Sandbox together. Yes, it is going to be a game changer, but it's also about different factions. How do these different factions and they have all these differences, but getting people to recognize that these are all these differences that different clans have. How can we be able to be a little bit more aware of that in society? So I'm always challenging my team to think of educational narratives even as we create our games. And now we're also thinking about creating a game with Wasfia, who is the first brown woman to have conquered all 7 summits. And we're trying to create a game of her, right? I mean, if you look into how phenomenally popular Barbie is as a franchise, as an IP, we want to also be creating games like a Tomb Raider, right? Where the lead a star is a female. So these are things that I think Smobler tries to do. But to your point, yes, there is a real danger of us becoming too insular and just only using digital technology. And so that is also why I think creators have a responsibility to create content that does not destroy social fabric, but enables a young person with their noble minds to be able to grow and be better versions of themselves. But I also urge responsible parenting. We can't always just say that only big tech or creators are responsible for parenting my child. I think that it's also important for a parent to say, I birthed this child. I need to take care of
Hmm.
the child, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
whole other conversation, which will lead to my mother book. So, but that's not all
Well,
for
okay, on that note, it sounds like we would have to improve the education, or the awareness piece at least, for people to understand what their children are doing and consuming in a metaverse environment. So even if, let's say, the parents aren't necessarily spending time in a 3D digital environment, they have to at least be, to some degree, aware of the basic tenets of what a metaverse is, how it operates, how their kids are using it. Because if it's not, the responsibility is not on big tech, which I agree, it shouldn't be. Um, they're going to have to self-educate, or it leads me to my next point, interoperability, sort of a collective of groups and organizations. You reference interoperability, working together. Why is that important for the metaverse to grow and succeed?
Again, Samir, all your questions are so loaded with observation. So I think the first clarification I want to make is that I don't think that big tech is absolved from all responsibility. I do think that they have responsibility. I truly am of the belief that the bigger you are, the more responsibility you should have and should
Hmm.
take. As Spider-Man says, right? The more power you have, the more responsibility you have. I know I'm not quoting it exactly at verbatim,
With
but
great power comes great responsibility.
exactly, right? See, we all know our superheroes, right? That's the power of games. So I think that is one. But two, I also think that, to recognize that, when it comes down to responsible guidance, I think, just having it's not just about parenting, it's just having responsible role models and guardians is so important, right? Whether it's a school, it's an auntie, it's a big brother. I think just having responsible individuals guiding a young person, I think that's really important. That's also why I'm an educator at heart. But a third thing is, and to reference your point on interoperability, I think we are now entering a space where you don't have to be Riot Games or Epic Games or Meta to create content. Today we see everyone, in fact, 70%, and I'm probably I stand to be challenged. Someone can correct me and say maybe it's 99%. 70% of folks actually today say they want to be content creators. I'm sure the numbers are even bigger, right? And so if everyone today can be a content creator, I think there is freedom of speech, there is what we want to create and what we want to put out there. So my point is we're getting to a space where everything is becoming so much more blurred. because everyone today has a platform. You can be a media platform as you are. Let me just cross-reference why I always raise the point in any bio that describes me is that I really started as a broadcast media person. Why do I raise that? Because this means that I had to be responsible for what I put out in my career, you know, especially in those days when I was reporting for a television station or a radio station, because those companies could get into trouble, big trouble, if a representative like me spoke out of turn. Why? Because there was responsibility put on these institutions to put things forth that were seen to be respectable and communicated at a certain standard, right? That's why you became a representative, a spokesperson of a particular institution, in my case, the national media. So I had the platform to read the news and to, use television and radio and have books published by my national press, because I was seen as an upstanding person that could put forth even dissenting views in a non-polarizing way that people can then consume. But today, anyone, you and me, can potentially use this podcast to say incredibly inflammatory things. I mean, we can, right?
Hmm.
But maybe we aren't. Maybe in the next second I would. But my point is, today anyone can, and we recognize that this has become a concern because people do, and they do use it for the clickbaits. They do use it for the viewership. They do use it because you can monetize that. The more inflammatory I am, the more
The more
controversial,
eyeballs you get.
the more eyeballs you get. I can come out today
Yep.
and say something incredibly, but I just won't. It's just who I
Yeah.
am. It's just
Yeah.
my brand. But today, a lot of brands are made, and I don't mean brands like Gucci or Chanel, but I mean brands like a person, like an influencer, has made their brand by becoming very controversial. Just look at Mr. Beast. And he said, if you could lower the age of me being president, I will run. And guess what? You know, he might just win, right? Because it's all about eyeballs, it's all about viewership, it's all about how many followers you have today. Today, media has become more like a cult. And I don't mean cult in a bad way. I just mean more like I follow you, right?
Yep.
Right? And so it's no longer about who is saying the most objective truth or who is saying, because everyone debates truth, they just want to follow. I'm not blaming them because there's so much noise in media. But my point is, and going back to your point, that because today everyone is a platform, and everyone's the freedom to create, we now do have a crisis between the freedom of creation, the ability to own and monetize your freedom of creation, and that responsibility to society. Because I feel like that is the real challenge. And that is also where Smobler wants to be able to intervene, interpolate, and be able to be a voice for good while still creating content that is sticky and fun. And that is a challenge. And that's a challenge that Smobler and I am willing to take on.
How do you navigate that challenge
It's
day in
very
and day out?
It's very hard. It is to stay connected. It is to have conversations with smarter folks than me, like you, Smer. It is to constantly see what young people are doing, understand what they're doing, seeing, eating, breathing, drinking. Because today it's all about culture. You know, growing up, I'll give you a concrete example. I was the youngest person to sit on my board in a university. And I told my board, this is in my 20s, right? And I said, well, you know, the way we design our school campaign has to focus on the student. It's about their lifestyle. It's about their culture. And they're like, please, right? We have to focus on the engineering faculty, the labs, the building, you know, how much we've invested in. And this was me 30 years ago. But today, culture is the buzzword, right? NFTs are stored values of culture. We talk about culture, we talk about lifestyle today. What you're doing is essentially culture and lifestyle and entertainment. Everything that we see, feel, hear, touch, do is part of design and culture. You know, Steve Jobs said, right? If I didn't drop out of, if I wasn't fired from Apple and went to calligraphy class, I wouldn't have discovered that design vocabulary that has now infused all of Apple. And today we think that, oh, design and art and technology is one and the same. But growing up, those are all separate, right? We saw
Mm.
them as separate taxonomies. But today, all of this is life and art and culture and technology, and they're all fused together. And I think that's why um, we need founders and we need creators that understand what we consume, that are able to unpack what we're consuming. It's just as the analogy I'll give you, it's just as health fanatics may look at a label and look at, all the ingredients and the calories and the health benefits. I think content creators should have that sort of mentality. What am I consuming? What am I putting out? What are the impacts? I think the key that I say is I don't agree or disagree with what anyone puts out, as long as they are intentional. If your intention is to be incredibly provocative because you want XYZ, great, right? And recognize that what you're doing has impact, and this could potentially be the impact. To be honest, I prefer creators like this who say, I want to provoke because this is what I want to achieve, and I can deal with the repercussions. And here's how I'll deal with it. I actually prefer creators like this than
Right.
creators who say, I don't care, and I don't know. I really don't give an F what
Yeah.
people. I actually prefer that sort of a creator and content creation.
What's Smobler's intended intentions? What is Smobler intending to create? What
So
impression do you want people to leave with once they've experienced what Smobler offers?
thank you. So Smobler is essentially we bring brands, IPs, and communities onto the blockchain, but we also recognize that we're so early in this journey that we can't just create on-chain experiences. We need to build off-chain as well, right? So things like Roblox and even IRL or in real life events. Sorry, my cats are playing at the back. So in a nutshell, Smobler bridges and we built. So we built UGCs, we built for brands. Anyone from the government of Bhutan, we've built entire Bhutan verse for the Kingdom of Bhutan, and we're also launching a Bhutan coin backed by NFT. It'll be the world's first legal tender coin with NFT that will be launched in October. You're the first to hear it here. Uh, we also create experiences for the national television station, radio for a telco for Singapore, and we also create experiences for brands and IPs as well. So that's what we do for brands, but we also create bridges where we created the first ever interoperable project between Cardano and Polygon, where we brought Clay Nation, which is the biggest project on the Cardano chain, onto the Ethereum Polygon Sandbox ecosystem. So it's about bridging. And now with Ecorium, our own IP, we're doing the same, right? We're bridging together communities from the Sandbox and Roblox. We're bridging together communities from Bitcoin and Ethereum together. So it's always about trying to create bridges, because I think mass adoption is key, because we can't talk about Web3 if not enough people in Web3. We're all co-creating Web3 together, just as we talk about the internet, right? The internet wasn't built in a day, right? So similarly, that's what we're doing in Web3. We need to have more adoption, reduce friction points. So that's also why Smobler is building our own DApp, our own proprietary DApp that facilitates and enables cross-IP, cross-chain, cross-platform interoperability. So that's our contribution to the ecosystem as well, in addition to our IPs. So what we
Oh,
want to be for, yeah. So what we
congrats
want,
on all of that. That's amazing.
yeah. So I can even share that with you. I mean, I know today is just a podcast, but then happy to visually share with you some other time as well, or give you some visual material for you to use. But
Hmm.
basically, Smobler wants to be known for being a pioneer in the metaverse space, creating, building great projects for brands, IPs, and communities, for bridging communities from Web 2 to Web 3, or Web 3 to Web 2, like Pudgies, for example, is going from Web 3 to Web 2, right? And there's some brands that we're working with, a big Korean brand, for example, that I can't reveal now, is going from Web 2 to Web 3. So there are all these bridges, and our own proprietary DApp, where we facilitate this interoperability literally on our own DApp. So, and of course, be known for creating content and IPs that are not only sticky, memorable, but also have social impact, and creating a metaverse for it.
Wow. Um, where are you hoping to see the metaverse in 5 years from now?
I'm
I
hoping
mean,
to
the space moves so quickly that we're already where we're at today in such a short time frame. 5 years from now feels is pretty much like an eternity in this space. Where do you see us being 5 years?
You're absolutely right, Samir. Is like because I have cats, so it's like cat or doggy years. Like it's like one
Yeah,
year is
yeah, exactly.
like I absolutely think so. I feel like I've aged too. But anyway, to your point, I think one of the key things that I'd like to see happen is greater ease of adoption. Because right now, even for me as a user, going on to exchanges, going on to, it's still difficult. There is still a lot of friction points, and I think that can disallow and can be quite daunting for any first-time user. So I think what Smobler also tries to do is try to intervene in that. So for example, right now, like I said, how do we try and create cross-chain, cross-platform, basically to create enabling tools, technologies, platforms that make the seamless connection, right? So that the Roblox user can come to our dApp and be able to then be onboarded into Sandbox very quickly. Or the Sandbox community can then come to our dApp and be able to, go use their new skins, etc., in Roblox very quickly. So the whole point is it should feel as seamless as, going to an ATM. In fact, we don't even go to an ATM anymore, right? Everything is now just done digitally. I don't even know the last
Yep.
time I went to a bank to get money or use my ATM card. I just don't remember. And why? It's because all of this now is so seamless. We just transfer money, we just do everything digitally. I think that would be one of my hopes for the next 5 years. And I do think that we're getting there because like every single day, because we're in the scene and we have conversations with all our peers, everyone is building new tools, new protocols, new, technologies that enable a swifter uptake and broader adoption of Web3.
Yeah. And what are you most concerned about?
Scams. I will tell you this right now. Yesterday, a really trusted friend, and mind you, it happened twice. I mean, I'm very honest. I just want to share things very anecdotally because I think it's always the best, right? I don't want to give you things that you read off LinkedIn. So a really trusted friend tried to introduce me twice to what he thought were legit investors. And he'll send me their decks and all of that. I'll be like, yep, they're legit. Happy to speak with them. First time I went physically to go meet them, I'm like, no, they're not legit, right? The second time was yesterday, literally. I sent them my Zoom link as you send me your Zoom link. I'm not going to name names because they are so it's not the company that is the problem, right? I don't want to name them because people will think that
Sure.
it's but
Absolutely. Yep.
they're known investor, but someone posed as them. And so my friend who facilitated the transaction or not the transaction, the interaction said, so I gave them my Zoom link as you give me my Zoom link. And then of course, XYZ founder of known firm says, oh, sorry, I can't. Very, very, it sounds very genuine. Oh, sorry, I can't log into your Zoom. Can I share with you my link? I said, sure. So I click on this link. And of course, it's a part of me that just wants to jump all in and trust and just click on any link, but we know
Sure.
better, right? So
Yep.
I'm like, clicked on it and I was like, and in my heart, I was sad because I was like, it's a scam, and it's sad because it also means that it's either my friend is part of the scam or my friend who is a trusted friend is hoodwinked into the scam.
Yep.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? And the scammer is so good. He's been able to get to me by coming to pretend like, oh, my Zoom link isn't working. Can you use my link? And just by clicking that, and it's these very it's these things that you don't think about, just like clicking a link. But these scams exist every single day, and that's why people fear Web3 because they think that everyone's a scammer. And this is me being a pioneer in the space, and even then, they still get flooded up to the
Yeah.
top of the pile. So you can imagine the regular person. I mean, they must be terrified. Like, I'm just not going to touch
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just going to touch Discord. I just don't want to go to, anything to do with Web3 because I'm terrified, is my
And
point.
it's a very real problem. And it doesn't seem like it's going away or getting any better. In
So,
fact, it
and
seems
getting
like
better.
there's more and more of them.
Yeah.
So then it begs the question, how do you regulate this? How do you put in safeguards to protect new users, especially when scalability and adoption of this space is basically a lifeline to it?
Exactly. And to your point, right, regulators and legislation always it has to lag behind technology. I mean, that's just a fact, right? You can't have entrepreneurship and growth and creativity if you have all of these regulations
Sure.
before. It's like, what are they even going to regulate? What are they even going to legislate about, right? You need enough mass adoption, enough use cases, enough users in order to. It's like right now we've just seen, the launch of the Bitcoin ETF, and we're going to see word about, the upcoming Ethereum ETF. So we see
Hmm.
that all of this is a progress of space and time for Bitcoin to finally be legitimized, and now Ethereum, right? But the same token, you're going to see scammers and people, from the dark side trying to be able to, get into the game, and they are always going to be one step quicker and one step ahead. So I think certain things need to happen. I think I go back to education is really key. That is why I always say yes to speaking in podcast. We really need role models. We need folks who have established themselves in the space to sometimes take time off to speak. Sometimes a lot of these gigs are not paying gigs, right? Some are, but some aren't. Even moments like this, it is taking time off people's busy schedules. But I urge all of my peers and role models who are OGs in the space to take the time to do the educating and the education, because it's so important to have to restore faith and trust in the space so that people will dare to want to create and lean in and jump in. And also, to create enough liquidity in the space such that there is so much more legit jobs in the space that folks won't be enticed to want to go to the dark side, right? Like, wow, there's so much legit work here, like I don't
Yep.
want to go there. So I think collectively those of us who are really in the space to also step outside our own startups and our own projects sometimes. And I know it's hard because so much time and effort is really needed, but to recognize that for the greater good, to be altruistic, to create a metaverse for good, it really is important for us to collectively build this trust. Because for now, I'm telling you that the scammers are still out there, and like I told you, they're alive and well, just from what I saw yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary, scary just to even like when you hear it happen to someone, you hear it all the time and you
Yeah.
see it on social media, but when you
So
talk to
innocent.
someone who just went through it, it's a whole other,
And it's so innocent. Oh, can you, oh, the Zoom link doesn't work. Can
yeah,
you use my link? It's just so innocent.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Loretta, speaking of education and sharing time, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. This was incredibly insightful. Uh, I'm very amazed by all the work that you're doing. It's incredible to see. I can't wait to see it grow and blossom even further. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to connect again soon in the near future, and maybe we can check back in as you continue to develop all these amazing projects that you're working on.
I love that, Samir. If you allow me to do one shameless plug, our new game Battleground will be
Go
on
for
the
it.
Sandbox. So make sure you folks log on to the Sandbox and play Battleground. And we have a huge in real life event that will run alongside Token 2049. It's at September 17. We're going to be co-hosting an Ordinal Summit together with Nova, our own Smobler event, and that will be in Singapore, September 17, and one of the hottest clubs in Singapore, called Arc 11, right downtown in Orchard Road, which is like the main thoroughfare of Singapore. So we hope you log on to our website, smobler.io, or reach out to me. And I'd love to be connected with all of you. And thank you so much for your time, Samir, and for having me.
No, of course. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening and watching this. Thank you.
Thank you.